The World News Today is being brought to you by One Solar Solution. Check out how you can get those solar panels installed at your home or residence by going to onesolarsolution.com. Bringing you the world news coming up next. This is Radio Caravan, the world news, read by Shabnam Modgil. A man suspected of fatally shooting a supporter of a right-wing group in Portland, Oregon last week after a caravan of Donald Trump backers rode through downtown was killed yesterday as investigators moved in to arrest him. The man, Michael Reinhold, was 48 years old, killed as a federal task force attempted to apprehend him in Lacey, Washington, about 120 miles north of Portland. He was the prime suspect in the killing of 39-year-old Aaron J. Danielson, who was shot in the chest. And 7 Rochester police officers have been suspended by the city mayor after body cam footage showed a hood being placed over a black man who later died. The 41-year-old Daniel Prue died of asphyxia days after he was detained by police officers in Rochester, New York. And dozens of protesters gathered in the streets of Rochester after the body camera footage of the death of Daniel Prue in police custody became public. More than 250 people have been arrested since the police shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, with more than half from outside the county. And Blake, the black man, was shot 7 times in the back by a white police officer on the 23rd of last month, sparking 3 nights of unrest that resulted in roughly 24 fires and damages to numerous downtown businesses. U.S. Attorney General William Barr is claiming in an interview that Jacob Blake was committing a felony and armed when Kenosha police officers shot him in the back 7 times. The U.S. Attorney General has described white police brutality towards unarmed black Americans as a false narrative. Political battles and pending court fights threaten to upend months of planning for the pandemic election. In key states, they remain hamstrung with only weeks to prepare. Mail balloting was set to begin today in the presidential election as North Carolina starts sending out more than 600,000 ballots to voters, responding to a massive spike in requests that has played out across the country as voters look for safer ways to cast ballots during the pandemic. EPA Chief Andrew Wheeler defended the Trump administration's record on protecting the nation's air and water and said a second term would bring a greater focus on pollution cleanups in disadvantaged communities and less emphasis on climate change. In a speech commemorating the 50th anniversary of the EPA's founding, he said the agency was moving back towards an approach that had long promoted economic growth as well as a healthy environment and drawn bipartisan support. The Democratic-controlled House will vote on legalizing marijuana at the federal level for the first time in the chamber's history later this month, a hurdle Democrats and advocates are celebrating as Congress grapples with a host of pressing issues before the November election. An American soldier who helped rescue about 70 hostages said to be executed by Islamic State militants in Iraq has been approved to receive the Medal of Honor for his actions during that daring raid in 2015. And President Trump has strongly denied a magazine report saying he had spoken disparagingly about fallen U.S. military personnel buried in Europe and declined to visit an American cemetery during a trip to France because he thought it unimportant. The Atlantic reported that President Trump, who has touted his record helping U.S. veterans, had referred to Marines buried in an American cemetery near Paris as, and I quote, losers, and declined to visit 2 years ago because of concern that the rain that day would mess up his hair. 2 U.S. Special Forces soldiers jailed in Venezuela for trying to overthrow President Nicolas Maduro are seeking an official pardon for early release. Former U.S. Green Berets were given 20 years each for their role in a botched operation to kidnap Mr. Maduro and bring him to the U.S. for trial. Lebanon's army has said it had found 4.35 tons of ammonium nitrate near the entrance to Beirut port, the site of that huge blast last month caused by a large stockpile of the same highly explosive chemical. Rescue workers using cranes, shovels and their bare hands in search operations that actually resumed again this morning in the rubble of the building that collapsed last month in Beirut's catastrophic explosion are hoping to find a survivor after a pulsing signal was detected. Israel will impose a partial national lockdown next week to battle a coronavirus infection surge, according to the head of its pandemic task force, shouting his exasperation in an emotional television address. A drone dropped packets of what looked like cannabis over a main square in Tel Aviv after activists seeking to legalize the drug in Israel promised free weed from the air on social media. And Bahrain will allow all flights coming to and departing from the United Arab Emirates to cross through the island kingdom's airspace, a statement apparently allowing Israeli flights after neighboring Saudi Arabia issued a similar announcement. Greece's foreign minister headed to New York today for talks with the United Nations Secretary General as tensions between Greece and Turkey escalate over maritime boundaries and energy resources in the eastern Mediterranean. And locusts are threatening another part of Africa, with up to 7 million people in the southern region facing further food insecurity. The outbreaks of African migratory locusts in Botswana, Namibia, Zambia and Zimbabwe are not related to the huge outbreak of billions of desert locusts that has affected East Africa for months. Calls mounting for tough Western action against Russia over the suspected poisoning of Alexei Navalny, the prominent Kremlin critic. All the attempts over the years to stop the work of this critic have failed so far. He's been jailed repeatedly and twice put on trial for embezzlement and fraud. He's been put under house arrest and splashed in the face with green antiseptic, damaging his sight. He was hospitalized last year for a suspected poisoning while in custody, and his brother was jailed for over 3 years on fraud charges, and now he's in an induced coma in a Berlin hospital after suffering what German authorities say was a poisoning with a chemical nerve agent while the opposition leader and corruption fighter was traveling from Siberia. The Kremlin has denied involvement and questioned whether he was poisoned at all. You're listening to the World News on Radio Caravan. And the World Health Organization does not expect widespread vaccinations against COVID-19 until the middle of next year, stressing the importance of rigorous checks on their effectiveness and safety. Thailand is racing ahead with contact tracing after detecting its first domestic coronavirus infection in over 3 months, with tests conducted on nearly 200 people with possible exposure to that new case. North Korea is likely waiting until after the U.S. elections to reopen negotiations with Washington over its nuclear arsenal, said South Korea's ambassador in Washington yesterday. And authorities say that a new fire has broken out on a massive and fully loaded oil supertanker off the coast of Sri Lanka. Police in Nepal used tear gas and water cannons to break up a religious rally that defied a government ban on public gatherings imposed to fight the coronavirus pandemic. Despite the ban, about 2,000 residents poured into a major thoroughfare of Lalitpur near Nepal's capital of Kathmandu to pull a chariot of the rain god, a ritual that has been celebrated for countless generations. 7 human rights experts affiliated with the UN have raised concerns over Hong Kong's national security law in a letter addressed to Chinese authorities, saying that the law infringed on certain fundamental rights. And in the midst of heightened tensions in eastern Ladakh, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh is likely to hold talks with his Chinese counterpart this evening in Moscow on the sidelines of a ministerial meet of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The death of a Tibetan member of an Indian Special Forces unit in a mine blast near the site of a border flare-up with Chinese troops has offered a rare glimpse into a little-known group of elite high-altitude warriors the Tibetans live in India. Army Chief Manoj Mukund Narawane said that the situation along the contested line of actual control was delicate and serious, and the army has taken some precautionary measures to enhance security in the wake of the ongoing developments. He reached Leh yesterday for a 2-day security review of the Ladakh sector, where India and Chinese armies have deployed almost 100,000 soldiers and weaponry in their forward and depth areas. Asia has registered more than 100,000 deaths linked to the coronavirus since it first emerged in December. A total of 100,667 deaths have been attributed to the coronavirus in the region out of 5.42 million officially declared cases, with 4.25 million considered to have recovered. While India is setting new records for COVID-2019 cases, in every other country among the top 20 in terms of cases, the daily addition is now well below the peak value. In terms of fatalities, India is the most affected country with nearly 3/4 of the total deaths in the region, and it is followed by Indonesia and then Pakistan. There has been an exponential rise in daily testing in India, with 11.72 lakh samples to detect COVID-19 tested, while active cases are rising on a daily basis, led by rapidly rising positive cases across the country. The health ministry say that the trajectory of average daily active cases in the 5 high-burden states have declined during this last week, and those states are Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Uttar Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. The Supreme Court of India dismissed the bail plea filed by former Congress leader Sajjan Kumar, who is lodged in the Tihar jail after he was convicted by the Delhi High Court 2 years ago for his role in the 1984 anti-Sikh riots. Veteran Indian spinner Harbhajan Singh, who plays for the Chennai Super Kings, is pulled out of the upcoming season of the IPL, citing personal reasons. And in a sigh of relief for the Chennai Super Kings, the franchise will now start training from today, as no new coronavirus cases have been detected in the contingent. Pakistan regretted the politicization of the United Nations sanctions regime after 5 UN Security Council members blocked its bid to get 2 Indians accused of terrorism. And describing his relationship with the army's top brass as most harmonious, Prime Minister Imran Khan said that the military fully supported his government's policies, whether relating to India or Afghanistan. A week after allegations were levelled regarding his family's assets, retired Lieutenant General Asim Salim Bajwa, while rejecting the allegations, has said he was resigning as Special Assistant to the Prime Minister on Information and Broadcasting and would submit his resignation to the Prime Minister today. Lahore Police added Section 7 of the Anti-Terrorism Act in the FIR against PMLN Vice President Mariam Nawaz, her husband retired Captain Mohammad Safdar, and party workers in a case relating to a clash outside the National Accountability Bureau's Lahore office. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all that I have in the news for you today.